The EWMA model and the GARCH model are those two models that the curriculum extensively touched upon in this chapter, and the purpose of this lesson is to put the similarities and the differences on one page so that you can have the intuitive sense to pass the FRM exam. So let's get started. So as I earlier said, this video is about comparing the EWMA model with the GARCH model, which in essence is an extension of the EWMA model. In terms of the definition, this is how the curriculum defines the EWMA model, which is Formula 3.2 in the curriculum, and this is how the curriculum defines the GARCH model, which is Formula 3.3 in the curriculum. And in terms of the similarities, which is about the model characteristics, I want you to be aware that both of the models are explanatory models, meaning that the volatility is explained in terms of the volatility, the returns, and in the case of the GARCH model, the long-term average volatility. And the second similarity I want you to be aware of is that both of these models are autoregressive models, meaning that past values can explain future values. And speaking of tricky situations these models are trying to assess, which is obviously within the context of time-changing volatility, also called as stochastic volatility, you need to be aware that the EWMA model is mostly trying to address a phenomenon called volatility clustering, a situation in which you have high volatility time periods followed by low volatility time periods. And this is because of the lambda coefficients, which I extensively elaborated on in my previous lesson. So just to refresh your memory, the lambda coefficients are these coefficients over here, and the role of these lambda coefficients are to assign higher weights to more recent outcomes and to assign lower weights to older outcomes. And when it comes to the GARCH model, the tricky situation it is trying to assess is mean reversion, and this is because, as you can see in the formula above, there is the long-run average volatility incorporated in the formula. Now, this may be more of a generalization, but volatility clustering has been observed to be present in tradable assets like stocks and bonds, while mean reversion has been mostly observed in non-tradables, which are basically variables like interest rates or volatility. What I mean by non-tradables is that these assets can be traded, but the trading is possible only through some sort of derivatives like VIX options, variance or volatility swaps, or even interest rate swaps. So the overall point is that there is no direct trading mechanism when it comes to things like interest rate or volatility. So even though these can be traded through derivatives, there is no direct trading mechanism when it comes to things like interest rates or volatility. And this is also more or less a generalization, but when it comes to the EWMA model, the primary use case is obviously in risk management, such as calculating VAR or expected shortfall. And this is because, as per my previous lesson, the lambda coefficients over here assisting us to gauge sudden reactions in the market. And when it comes to the GARCH model, the primary use case is macroeconomic forecasting, and this is because, as you can see in the formula over here, there is this long-run average volatility component, which is basically helping us to forecast long-term dynamics. Now, before I finish this lesson, let me quickly touch upon another tricky situation when it comes to stochastic volatility. As I earlier said, both models are good at addressing a specific tricky situation, but there is a third tricky situation within the context of stochastic volatility. And this third tricky situation is called a regime switch, and this is that tricky situation which neither the EWMA nor the GARCH model can properly address. And this is because a regime switch is a sudden and unexpected event. And when it comes to this situation over here, it is generally approached through a trade-off between accuracy or the low likelihood of a regime switch. Accuracy, of course, refers to covering a long time period in our dataset, and the low likelihood for a regime switch would imply to cover a shorter time period in our dataset. But you will understand it much better after you watch my next lesson, which will be covering this topic.